Princess Valith Soanthar stood at the great window of her chamber and watched the twin suns sink below the crystal mountains of her homeworld. She was tired in a way that sleep could never fix behind her. The doors opened, and her handmaiden Lyris entered with careful steps. "Your Highness," Lyris said softly, "the Archon requests your presence in the throne room." "Another suitor," Valith said without turning around. "Yes, Your Highness. Who is it this time?" "Lord Kethrin of the Thyrany Collective, Your Highness." Valith closed her violet eyes and let out a long breath. This would be the 48th suitor she had met in 48 cycles. She already knew how it would end. Kelvary were not like other species in the galaxy. They possessed a gift that others called magic, but was simply biology. Every Kelvary could sense the emotions of those around them. They could feel joy and sorrow and anger and love as clearly as others felt heat or cold for. Most Kelvary, this gift was a blessing. For Valith, it had become a curse. She felt everything with 10 times the intensity of her people when she entered a crowded room. The emotions of everyone present crashed into her like waves against a cliff. She had learned to build walls in her mind, but those walls could not block everything, and when someone touched her or stood too close, she felt their true intentions as clearly as spoken words. This was why she had rejected every suitor, not because they were ugly or cruel or stupid, but because she could feel what they really wanted. Lord Vareth of the Outer Kingdoms had smiled kindly, but his heart burned with ambition. For her father's throne, or of the merchant worlds, had spoken poetry, but his soul calculated the trade routes her marriage would open. Even the delegation from the ancient Synthesis Collective had offered her eternal life, but she had felt their hunger to absorb the Kelvary dominion into their hive mind. Not one of them had wanted her. They wanted power and territory and influence. She was merely the key that would unlock those treasures. Valith turned from the window and walked to her. Mirror-tall figure stared back at her with violet eyes and silver-blue skin that shimmered like moonlight on water. People considered her beautiful. She considered herself a prisoner in a gilded cage. "Tell my father I will attend," she said to Lyris. "As you wish, Your Highness." The throne room of the Kelvary Dominion could hold 10,000 beings. Today it held perhaps 200, mostly nobles and courtiers who had come to watch another rejection. They whispered behind their hands as Valith entered. She heard words like mad and stubborn and disgrace. She ignored them all. Her father, the Archon, sat upon the crystal throne with his forearms folded across his chest. His eyes were the deep purple of disappointment. Beside him stood the suitor. Lord Kethrin was impressive by any standard. 8 feet of crystalline muscle, his body carved from living gemstone that caught the light and scattered it in rainbow patterns. His people were ancient and powerful, and his proposal would bring great advantage to the Dominion. Valith walked toward him and felt his emotions before she had crossed half the room. Greed, wrapped in politeness, ambition, hidden behind flattering words, and beneath it all, a cold assessment of her value, like a merchant examining goods for purchase. She stopped 10 feet away from him. "Lord Kethrin," she said. "Princess Valith," he replied with a bow that was perfectly correct and completely false. "I have traveled across the stars to offer you my heart and my kingdom." "Your heart," Valith repeated. "Yes, my lady. You have no heart." "Lord Kethrin." The court gasped. The Archon's eyes narrowed. Lord Kethrin's crystalline face showed no emotion, but Valith felt his rage spike like a blade. "I mean, only," Valith continued, "that your people's hearts are made of crystal and function differently than ours." The tension broke slightly as courtiers nodded at this diplomatic recovery. But Valith was not finished. "I thank you for your offer," she said, "but I must decline." "May I ask why?" "Princess, because you do not want me." "Lord Kethrin, I assure you, you want the 17 mining colonies my hand would bring you, and you want the military alliance against your enemies in the Thyrany Civil War." and you want the prestige of marrying into the oldest bloodline in this sector." She stepped closer and dropped her voice so only he could hear. "But you do not want me, and I will not be a prize in someone else's game." Lord Catherine's crystalline eyes flickered with something that might have been respect. "You see clearly." "Princess," he said quietly. "Too clearly," she agreed. He bowed again, and this time there was genuine acknowledgement in it. "The Dominion's loss," he said, "and my own." After he departed, the Archon dismissed the court and summoned his daughter to his private chambers. 48. He said when they were alone, "Yes, Father, the Council grows impatient. The Council can wait. The Dominion cannot wait forever." Velith, she faced her father with steel in her spine. "I will not marry someone who sees me as a tool. All royal marriages are tools. Then I will break this tradition or I will die unmarried." The Archon studied his daughter for a long moment. "You are so much like your mother," he said. Finali Velith felt his sorrow then. The old wound of losing his queen to illness 20 years past. "I will give you 1 more year," the Archon said, "and then we will discuss alternatives." "Thank you, Father." She left his chambers and walked through the palace gardens under the light of the twin moons. Her heart felt heavy in her chest. 1 more year of suitors with false smiles. 1 more year of drowning in the greed of others. She did not know how she would survive it. The next morning, everything changed. Sirens woke the palace before dawn. A damaged ship had entered Calvary space. Its hull torn and its engines failing. The vessel was of human design. Humans were a young species, barely known to the Dominion. Their ship carried 30 souls seeking only repairs and safe passage. The Archon agreed to receive their delegation as a minor diplomatic court. Velith attended out of boredom and curiosity. She stood at the back of the small reception hall and watched the humans enter. They were strange creatures, soft and fragile compared to most species. Their captain was a woman named Chun, who spoke with careful respect. Velith barely heard her words. Her attention had fixed upon one of the humans standing behind the captain. He was tall for his kind, with dark hair touched by gray and a face marked by scars. He stood perfectly still while the others shifted and fidgeted. He did not speak. He did not even seem to breathe. And when Velith reached out with her gift to sense his emotions, she felt nothing, absolutely nothing. Not the cold nothing of death or the blocked nothing of mental shields. Simply silence, a profound and peaceful emptiness where emotion should have been. Velith's breath caught in her throat. In 30 years of life, she had never encountered anything like this. Every being in the galaxy had emotions. Every being projected feelings like a star projects light. But this human was a void, a quiet space in a universe of noise. She had to know why. She had to know who he was, for the first time in longer than she could remember. Princess Velith Soranther felt something other than tired. She felt curious, and somewhere deep in her guarded heart, a tiny spark flickered to life. The human refugees were given quarters in the diplomatic wing of the palace. It was a small section reserved for visitors of little importance, far from the grand halls where noble guests were. House Velith did not care about the locations. She cared only about the silent man. For 3 days, she watched him from a distance. She observed how he moved through the corridors with careful steps, always aware of his surroundings. She noticed how the other humans treated him with a mixture of warmth and sadness, like he was someone precious who had been broken. She saw him sit alone in the observation gardens each evening, watching the twin suns set without moving or speaking. On the 4th day, she approached Captain Chun. "Tell me about the scarred man," Velith said without greeting. Chun looked up from her data tablet with surprise. "Your Highness, I was not expecting." "The man who does not speak," Velith interrupted. "Who is he?" Chun's expression shifted to something complicated. "His name is Marcus Cole," she said. "He was a soldier before he joined our crew. He does not fight anymore." Your Highness, why does he not speak? Chun hesitated for a long moment. That is his story to tell, she said finally. Though I suppose he cannot tell it himself. Explain. Marcus has not spoken a word in 7 years. Your Highness, Valeth felt something twist in her chest. Is he injured? His vocal cords were damaged. Yes. But the injury could be repaired if he wished it. He chooses not to speak. He chooses silence, Chen confirmed. As penance. Penance for what? Chun set down her data tablet and met the princess's eyes directly. 7 years ago, Marcus was stationed on a colony world called New Haven, and his unit was assigned to protect a refugee settlement during a civil conflict. Valeth listened without interrupting. 300 civilians lived in that settlement, Chun continued, including 40 children, and when the enemy attacked, Marcus and his squad were the only defense. What happened? They held the line for 11 hours. Your Highness, and Marcus called for reinforcements the entire time. Screaming into his communicator until his voice gave out, Chun paused and her eyes grew distant. When help finally arrived, they found Marcus alone among the dead, and his ammunition was spent, and his throat was torn from screaming. And every single civilian had been killed. Valeth felt the weight of those words settle into her bones. He blames himself, she said. He believes he failed them, Chun replied. And nothing anyone says changes that belief. So he carries his silence like a wound that he will not let heal. Why did you take him onto your ship? Because he needed somewhere to go, Chun said simply. And because beneath all that grief, Marcus Cole is still one of the finest men I have ever known. Valeth nodded slowly. Thank you, Captain. Your Highness, Chun said as Valeth turned to leave. May I ask why you are interested in Marcus? Valeth considered the question. Because when I reach out to sense his emotions, she said, I feel only silence, and in my entire life, I have never known peace like that. She left Chun staring after her with a thoughtful expression. That evening, Valeth went to the observation gardens. Marcus sat on his usual bench, his gray eyes fixed on the setting suns. She did not announce herself. She simply sat down beside him and watched the sky turn from gold to purple to black. He glanced at her once. In that single look, she saw surprise and confusion and something that might have been the beginning of curiosity, but he did not move away. He did not gesture. For her to leave, he simply returned his gaze to the horizon and let her share his silence. They sat together until the stars came out. Valeth felt that absence of emotion from him like a cool breeze on a hot day. No ambition pressed against her mind. No greed clawed at her senses. No hidden agenda lurked beneath polite words. Just emptiness. Just peace. She returned the next evening, and the evening after that they did not communicate in any traditional sense. Sometimes she spoke aloud, telling him small things about the gardens or the stars or the history of her world. He listened without responding, but his attention was real and focused. In times they simply sat in silence. Two damaged souls finding comfort in each other's presence. On the 7th evening, Marcus brought a small tablet with him. He typed something and showed it to her. The words read, Why do you come here? Valeth considered her answer carefully. Because you are the only person in this palace who wants nothing from me, she said. He typed again, I have nothing to offer. That is exactly what I need, she replied. Something flickered in his gray eyes. She reached out with her gift, searching for some trace of emotion, and for the first time, she felt something from him. It was buried so deep that she almost missed it. Grief, vast and heavy as an ocean. Guilt, sharp and constant as a knife wound. But beneath those dark waters, she sensed a light that refused to die, a core of warmth that had survived everything the universe had thrown at him. Hope, perhaps, or maybe just a stubborn human refusal to surrender completely. She pulled back from his emotions and found him watching her. You felt that, he typed. Yes, I am sorry. Do not be sorry, she said. Your pain is honest. And I have never felt anything so honest in my life. He stared at her for a long moment. Then he typed, You are strange for a princess. You are strange for a human. His lips twitched in what might have been the ghost of a smile. It was the most beautiful thing Valith had seen in years from that night forward. Their silent courtship began in earnest. They walked through the palace gardens together. They watched the stars from the observation deck. They shared meals in comfortable quiet. Communicating through typed words and simple gestures, the court began to whisper. The nobles noticed the princess spending time with the human refugee. They did not understand what she saw in him. How could they understand? They had never drowned in the emotions of everyone around them. They had never craved silence the way a dying man craves water. Valith found herself counting the hours until evening. She found herself smiling at small things. She found herself caring about someone other than herself for the first time in years, and slowly, carefully, she began to fall in love with the man who offered nothing but his presence. She knew the court would never accept, and she knew her father would forbid the match. She knew that everything about this was impossible. But when she sat beside Marcus Cole and felt his peaceful silence wrap around her like a blanket, she did not care about impossible. She only cared about the way her heart felt full. Instead of empty, she only cared about the way his gray eyes softened when he looked at her. She only cared about the way his scarred hand reached for hers in the darkness, and when his fingers intertwined with hers for the first time, she felt a single clear emotion break through his silence. It was love, pure and terrified, and asking for nothing in return. Valith held his hand tightly and made a decision. She would choose this man no matter what it cost her. The bonding ceremony was held on the first day of the new cycle of Earth. Wore the traditional silver robes of a Calvary bride, and her skin shimmered like starlight under the great chandeliers. Marcus stood beside her in human formal wear, simple and dark against the brightness of the court. The Archon performed the ceremony himself. His voice was steady, but Valith could feel his mixed emotions through their family bond, pride in his daughter's courage, fear for her future, and beneath it all, a grudging respect for the silent human who had won the trials. By the light of the twin suns, the Archon intoned, and by the ancient laws of the Dominion, I bind these two souls together. He placed his hands on their joined fingers. What the stars have witnessed, let no being tear apart. The court remained silent. No cheers rose from the nobles. No celebration erupted from the gathered lords. They watched with cold eyes and measured expressions. Valith did not care. She looked at Marcus and saw his gray eyes shining with unshed tears. She felt his love pulsing through their clasped hands like a heartbeat. That was enough. That was everything. The political consequences came swiftly. 3 noble houses withdrew from the Dominion Council within the first week. They called the marriage an insult to Calvary tradition. They called Marcus a stain on the royal bloodline. They called Valith a fool who had doomed her people for the sake of personal happiness. Lord Varric, still nursing his wounded pride from the trials, led a formal delegation to demand the marriage be annulled. The human cheated. He declared before the court, no primitive species could defeat a tyranny warrior in fair combat. Marcus stood silently at Valith's side. She squeezed his hand once and then turned to face the delegation. Lord Varric, she said calmly, are you claiming that you, a warrior bred for combat over 3,000 years of evolution, were somehow tricked by an unarmed human with no special abilities? Varric's crystalline face darkened. I am saying that such a thing is impossible, he replied. And yet it happened, Valith said, in front of hundreds of witnesses. And the only impossibility I see is your inability to accept defeat with grace. The court stirred with whispered reactions. Some nobles nodded at the princess's words, others glared with open hostility. The marriage stands, the Archon announced, ending the debate. "My daughter has followed the ancient laws, and I will hear no more challenges." Lord Varric withdrew with murder in his eyes, but the nobles were not the only ones watching. The common people of the Dominion had heard the story of the choosing ceremony. They had heard how a princess rejected wealth and power. They had heard how she chose a scarred soldier with nothing to offer but his heart to the workers in the mining colonies. This was revolution to the servants in the great houses. This was hope to the soldiers who guarded the borders. This was respect. Messages began arriving at the palace. Simple people writing simple words, a mother thanking the princess for showing her daughter that love mattered more than status. A young man saying he finally believed he might be worthy of happiness. An old soldier who had lost his voice in a war decades past, sending his blessing to a brother in silence. Valeth read every message. Each one made her heart swell with something she had never expected to feel connection. For all her life, she had been isolated by her gift, alone in a crowd of screaming emotions. Now she understood that her choice had meaning beyond herself. She had given people permission to believe in something better. Marcus read the messages too late at night when they sat together in their chambers. She would watch him scroll through the words of strangers. Sometimes his eyes grew bright with tears he would not shed. Sometimes his scarred hands trembled slightly. One night she asked him what he was feeling, typed his answer slowly. "I thought I had failed everyone, but maybe I can still help someone." She pressed her forehead to his. "You help me every day," she whispered. "You saved me from drowning, Marcus, and you did not even know it." His arms wrapped around hers. She felt his love like warmth spreading through her chest. The human refugees had been granted permanent residence in the Dominion. Captain Chun and her crew became unofficial ambassadors. Bridging the gap between species cultural exchange programs began Human and Calvari. Scholars met to share knowledge. Artists collaborated on works that combined both tradition. Scientists started projects that neither species could have accomplished alone, all because a princess chose a soldier, all because love proved stronger than politics. 5 years passed. Valeth and Marcus ruled a small province far from the central court. They had requested this assignment themselves. Neither wanted the spotlight of the capital, neither needed the games of power that consumed the noble houses. Their province thrived under their care. Marcus organized the local defense forces with quiet efficiency. He could not speak, but he communicated through gestures and written words, and the soldiers who served under him would have followed him anywhere. Valeth handled the administration and diplomacy. Her gift allowed her to sense corruption before it could spread. Her fairness earned her the loyalty of every citizen in the province. They were happy, not the dramatic happiness of stories and songs, just the simple contentment of two people who fit together perfectly. Valeth woke each morning to find Marcus already awake. Watching her with soft gray eyes, she fell asleep each night with his arms around her, his silence a comfort rather than a void. They had found peace, but the galaxy was not at peace on a cold morning in their 6th year together. A messenger arrived with news that shattered everything. The Synthesis Collective had launched an invasion. Their hive ships descended on the outer colonies without warning. The Archon's fleet engaged them in the first battle and was destroyed. The Archon himself died on his flagship, torn apart by weapons that should not exist. Valeth's sisters had been captured in the initial assault as the sole remaining heir. Valeth was now ruler of the Calvary Dominion. She was now responsible for 1,000 worlds at war. She was now all that stood between her people and extinction. The weight of it crushed the breath from her lungs. She stood in the communication center of their provincial palace and stared at the tactical displays. Every screen showed disaster fleets burning colonies, falling billions of lives at risk, and Valeth felt herself drowning again, not in the emotions of others this time, in her own fear and grief, an overwhelming sense of inadequacy. She could not do this. She was not ready. Her father was dead, and her sisters were prisoners, and everything was falling apart. A hand touched her shoulders. She turned to find Marcus standing behind her. His gray eyes were steady and calm. He typed on his tablet and showed her the words, "You are not alone." She wanted to believe him. She wanted to find strength in his presence, but the screens kept flashing with death and destruction. "I cannot do this," she whispered. "Marcus, I am not strong enough." He typed again, "You are the strongest person I know." "That is not true." He set down his tablet and took her face in his scarred hands. His gray eyes held hers with an intensity that made her breath catch, and then Marcus Cole did something he had not done in 12 years. He opened his mouth, fought against the damage in his throat, forced sound through vocal cords that had been silent for over a decade. The words came out broken and rough, like glass scraping against stone, but they were clear. "You are enough," he said. "You were always enough, and I believe in you." Vela stared at him in shock. Tears spilled down her cheeks. He had broken his vow of silence for her. He had given her the one thing he had held back from everyone, his voice. She pulled him close and wept against his chest, and somewhere in that embrace, she found what she needed: strength, hope, the will to fight for her people, for her love for the silent man who had finally spoken. The Archon summoned Valeth on a cold morning when frost covered the Crystal Gardens. She knew what this meeting would bring. The whispers had reached her father's ears. "You shame our house," the Archon said when she stood before him. His forearms were folded across his chest, and his purple eyes burned with controlled anger. "I have done nothing shameful," Valeth replied. "You spend your evenings with a human refugee, a broken soldier who cannot even speak. And you hold his hand in the gardens where anyone can see." "I hold his hand because I choose to. He has no title," the Archon said. "No wealth, no political value, and you are a princess of the Calvary Dominion. I am aware of who I am." "Father, then act like it." Vela stepped forward and met her father's gaze without flinching. "I have rejected 48 suitors," she said, "because every single one of them wanted something from me other than me. And I could feel their greed and their ambition poisoning the air around them. That is the nature of political marriage. Then I reject that nature. You cannot simply, Marcus Cole wants nothing from me." Valeth interrupted. "He does not want our throne or our military or our trade routes. He does not even want my help or my pity. He wants only my company. And do you have any idea how precious that is?" The Archon was silent for a long moment. "You truly care for this human," he said finally. "I love him," Valeth said. And the words felt like freedom. "Love," her father repeated as if tasting something strange. "You loved Mother." The Archon flinched at that. "Your mother was a princess of equal standing. And yet you told me once that you would have loved her if she had been a servant. So do not lecture me about the requirements of royal hearts." Father and daughter stared at each other across the throne room. "The court will never accept him," the Archon said. "Then I will make them accept him." "How?" "Choosing ceremony," Valeth said. "Let Marcus stand among the suitors, and if he survives the trials, the court must accept him by ancient law." The Archon's eyes widened. "The trials are designed for warriors and princes," he said. "They would destroy him." "You do not know him," Valeth replied. "You see only a broken man, but I have felt what lies beneath his silence. And there is more strength in Marcus Cole than in all your noble suitors combined. And if he fails, he will not fail." The Archon studied his daughter for a long time. "You have your mother's stubbornness," he said at last, "and her courage, so I will allow this, but know that I do it against my better judgment." "Thank you." "Father, do not thank me yet, daughter, for the trials show no mercy." 3 days later, the great hall filled with nobles from across the Dominion. Word had spread that Princess Valeth had finally entered as suitor into the choosing ceremony. They expected a prince from some distant world. They expected a warrior of legendary skill. They did not expect Marcus Cole when he walked into the hall in simple human clothes with his scarred face and his silent mouth. The court erupted in whispers. "This is the princess's champion," someone said with disbelief. "A human." Another voice laughed. "And a mute one at that. This must be some kind of joke." Marcus stood calmly amid the mockery, his gray eyes swept the room once and then fixed on Valith, where she sat beside her father's throne. She felt a pulse of emotion from him, not fear or doubt, determination pure and absolute and unshakable. The three other suitors who had entered the Balain ceremony looked at Marcus with contempt. Lord Varric was a Thirani warrior. 7 feet of crystal and muscle, bred for combat. Prince Sauron came from the Fire Worlds. His body wreathed in controlled flames. Commander Tith was a cyborg from the Machine Clans. More metal than flesh against these champions. Marcus looked small and fragile. The first trial was combat. Lord Varric stepped forward immediately and demanded to face the human. "I will end this farce quickly," he announced to the crowd. Marcus walked to the combat circle without hesitation. He carried no weapon, he wore no armor. The signal sounded. Lord Varric charged with blinding speed, his crystalline fists raised to crush what happened next took less than 10 seconds. Marcus moved like water flowing around stone. He did not try to match Varric's strength. He redirected a shift of his body, sent Varric's first strike into empty air. A precise blow to a joint made the crystal warrior stumble before Varric could recover. Marcus was behind him. His hands found pressure points that existed in all living beings. Varric's arms went limp, his legs folded. He crashed to the ground with a sound like shattering glass. Marcus stepped back and waited. The hall was utterly silent. Prince Sauron and Commander Tith exchanged worried glances. Neither volunteered to fight next. "The human advances," the Archon announced, and his voice carried a note of surprise. Second trial was sacrifice. Each suitor stood before the court and declared what they would give for the princess's handprints. Sauron offered his kingdom's flame reserves, enough energy to power the Dominion for 1,000 years. Commander Tith offered military secrets from the Machine Clans, weapon designs beyond any technology known to organic species. When Marcus stepped forward, he simply typed on his tablet and showed it to the court. The words appeared on the great screen above the halley. "Have no kingdoms or secrets to offer. I can only give what I have: my loyalty until my last breath, my protection until my body fails, whatever she needs always," the nobles whispered. Uncertainly, this was not how the trial was supposed to work, but Valith saw something in their faces that surprised her. Some of them were moved. Some of them understood. The third trial was truth, an ancient device called the resonance pool stood in the center of the hall. It amplified the Kelvari ability to sense emotion 100-fold. Any being who entered its light would have their true feelings exposed to everyone. Present deception was impossible within the pool. Prince Sauron entered first. The court felt his ambition like a burning fire. They felt his desire for conquest and his plans to use the marriage as a stepping stone to greater power. He emerged red-faced and furious. Commander Tith entered second. His mechanical part shielded some of his emotions, but not all. The court felt his cold calculation, his view of the princess as an asset to be acquired. He emerged without shame, but also without support. Then Marcus stepped into the light. The resonance pool blazed around him, and the entire court gasped. They felt his grief first. Vast and dark as the space between stars, they felt his guilt. The weight of 300 souls he believed he had failed. They felt his certainty that he deserved nothing good, that happiness was not meant for him. Some nobles wept at the intensity of his pain, but beneath the darkness, They felt something else: love not for power or position, not for wealth or influence, love for a woman who sat with him in silence and asked nothing of him, love so pure and selfless that it shone like a star in the void of his grief, love that wanted only to protect her, to support her, to be whatever she needed. Marcus emerged from the pool with his gray eyes steady. He had no secrets left. He had nothing to hide. He had already paid for everything. Archon rose from his throne. The trials are complete, he announced. And by the ancient laws of the choosing ceremony, Marcus Cole of humanity has proven himself worthy. The court erupted in chaos, but above the shouting and the protests, Valeth's voice rang clear. I choose Marcus Cole as my consort. She descended from her place beside the throne and walked to where Marcus stood. She pressed her forehead to his in the Calvary gesture of eternal bonding, and in that moment, she felt his love wrap around her like sunlight. For the first time in her life, Princess Valeth Sarnther was not alone. The War Council gathered in the ruins of the capital. Lords and generals and admirals from across the Dominion sat around a table covered with tactical displays. They looked at Valeth with doubt in their eyes. She was young, she was untested in war, and she had married a human. None of them believed she could save them. The Synthesis Collective controls 40% of our territory, Admiral Korath reported. Their hive ships are unlike anything we have faced before, and our fleet losses are catastrophic. What are our options? Valeth asked. We could negotiate, Lord Varric suggested, and there was something ugly in his voice. Perhaps they would accept tribute in exchange for peace. The Synthesis does not negotiate, General Thane said. They absorb. Any species that surrenders to them loses their individual consciousness forever. Then we fight, Valeth said. With what? Admiral Korath demanded. Our fleets are broken, our armies scattered, and we cannot match their numbers or their technology. Marcus stepped forward. He had not spoken since the night he broke his silence. His voice was too damaged for extended speech, but he typed on his tablet and projected the words on the main screen. I have an idea. The council stared at him with barely concealed contempt. The human wishes to speak. Lord Varric sneered. Perhaps he will defeat the Synthesis by typing them a strongly worded message. Be silent, Valeth said coldly. Marcus Cole defeated you in single combat, Lord Varric. Or have you forgotten? Varric's crystalline face darkened. But he said nothing more. Marcus typed his proposal. The Synthesis wins because they think as one mind. But that is also their weakness, for a single mind cannot imagine what it has never experienced. And what have they never experienced? General Thane asked. Chaos, unpredictability, the madness of individual creativity. Marcus looked around the room. Humans are not strong or fast or advanced. But we are creative, and we fight in ways that make no logical sense. And we refuse to surrender even when defeat is certain. You propose we use human tactics. Admiral Korath said slowly. I propose we combine Calvary perception with human unpredictability. Understood what he meant. Her gift allowed her to sense enemy movements and emotions. Human tactical thinking could exploit that information in ways the Synthesis would never predict. The human refugees. She said, how many are trained for combat? Marcus typed, 3,000 now, trained in human military doctrine, and they will fight for the dominion that gave them sanctuary. 3,000 is nothing against the Synthesis armada. Lord Varric scoffed. Marcus smiled. It was the first time any of them had seen him smile. It was not a comforting expression. We do not need to defeat their armada. We need to cut off the head, and the Synthesis is controlled by a central consciousness on their flagship. Destroy that, and their entire fleet becomes confused and vulnerable. No one has ever gotten close to the flagship. Admiral Korath said no one has ever tried the way humans would try. The plan was insane. It relied on speed and deception and suicidal bravery. It required a strike team to infiltrate the Synthesis flagship, while the combined fleet created a distraction Marcus would lead. The strike team Valeth refused to allow it. "You cannot ask me to send you to your death," she said. When they were alone, he typed, "I'm not asking. I'm telling you that this is what I must do. Marcus." He took her hands in his. Gray eyes were calm and certain. "For 7 years, I believed I failed the people I was supposed to protect." He typed, "Now I have a chance to protect an entire civilization, and I cannot turn away from that. I cannot lose you. You will not lose me." He pressed his forehead to hers. "Whatever happens," he typed, "I will find my way back to you." Battle began. 3 days later, the combined cavalry fleet engaged the Synthesis Armada above the colony world of Thyner. Admiral Korath commanded the fleet with desperate courage. Lord Varric led a squadron of crystal fighters in a suicidal charge against the enemy vanguard. Even the nobles who had opposed the marriage fought with everything they had, because Valeth had asked them to, because she had stood before them and spoken not of duty or tradition, but of survival, because she had shown them that she was willing to die beside them. Meanwhile, Marcus and his team approached the flagship in a captured Synthesis shuttle. Valeth monitored their progress through a neural link. She felt the emotions of the Synthesis drones like cold static against her mind. She guided Marcus through the ship, telling him which corridors were clear and which held enemies left at the junction. She sent through their body feel confusion from the central chamber. "They do not expect you." Marcus moved through the alien vessel like a ghost. His team followed in perfect silence. Humans were not physically impressive, but they were masters of this kind of warfare: small unit tactics, infiltration, the precise application of violence. They reached the central consciousness chamber without raising an alarm. Inside was the heart of the Synthesis collective, a vast organic computer that linked every drone in the Armada. Destroying it would shatter their coordination, but the chamber was guarded by the Synthesis Prime, a being that combined the strength of 1,000 warriors with the intelligence of 1,000,000,000 minds. Marcus signaled his team to plant the explosives while he faced the Prime alone. The fight was brutal. Marcus was faster and more creative, but the Prime was stronger and could predict his movements. By processing thousands of possible outcomes, blood ran down Marcus's face from a dozen wounds. His left arm hung useless at his side, but he would not fall every time the Prime knocked him down. He rose again every time death seemed certain. He found a way to survive. The Synthesis Prime paused. "You cannot win," it said through 1,000 voices. "Why do you continue to fight?" Marcus smiled through bloody teeth. He could not speak, but he typed one final message on his tablet and held it up for the Prime to see. "Because someone I love is waiting for me." The explosives detonated. The central consciousness dissolved in fire and light across the battlefield. Every Synthesis ship went silent. Drones froze in place. Weapons stopped firing. Hive mind was broken. Admiral Korath's fleet swept through the confused enemy armada in hours. The battle was won. Valeth felt Marcus through their bond, faint but alive. She sent rescue shuttles immediately. They found him in the wreckage of the flagship. Both his legs were broken. His internal injuries were severe, but he was breathing, and when Valeth reached his side in the medical bay, his gray eyes opened. He tried to speak, but no sound came. His voice was gone again. Perhaps forever this time. But Valeth did not need to hear him speak. She felt his love through their bond. Bright and warm as sunlight, she pressed her forehead to his and whispered the words that mattered. "You came back to me." His scarred hand found hers. He held on tight, and he did not let go. War ended with the Synthesis collective's defeat. Valeth's sisters were rescued from captivity. The Dominion began the long process of rebuilding, and in the aftermath, something remarkable happened. The alliance between humans and cavalry that Marcus and Valeth had created became the foundation for something larger. Other species saw what they had accomplished together. They saw that cooperation was possible across every divide within 50 years. The Human Cavalry Alliance had grown to include 300 species. It became the greatest federation the galaxy had ever known, not built on conquest or domination, built on the simple truth that beings are stronger together than apart. Historians would debate the politics and the tactics for millennia, but the poets knew the real story. It began with a princess who could feel everything, and a soldier who offered nothing but himself. She was drowning in the emotions of others. He was drowning in his own guilt and grief. They found each other, and they found peace on the anniversary of their 50th year together. Valith and Marcus sat in the gardens of the provincial palace where they had made their home. They were old now. Her silver-blue skin had faded to pale gray. His dark hair had turned completely white, but when she looked at him, she still saw the silent stranger who had first caught her attention in a crowded reception hall. And when he looked at her, his gray eyes still softened with the same love she had felt in the resonance pool so many years ago. He typed on his tablet with trembling fingers. "Thank you." "For what?" she asked. "For choosing me." Valith took his hand and pressed it to her heart. "You were the only choice," she said. "You were always the only choice." They sat together in comfortable silence as the twin suns set too. Souls who had found each other against impossible odds too. Broken people who had learned to be whole together. The galaxy spun on around. Them wars would come and go, empires would rise and fall. But in that garden, in that moment, there was only peace and love and the quiet understanding that sometimes the greatest strength is simply being exactly what someone needs, even when you have nothing else to give. That is the human way, not because humans are the strongest, or the fastest, or the most advanced, but because sometimes a broken soldier with no voice can save a princess just by sitting beside her in silence, and sometimes that is enough. That is more than enough. That is everything.